Hello, everyone. I hope we're all doing well in these very strange and difficult times. And Shabbat Shalom, as we prepare to enter yet another Shabbat. And I want to share a thought with you related to our Torah portion, related to what's happening right now in the world, and related to what's happening right now in the Jewish calendar, as well as we begin the month of Av, which is a month of a serious approach to life. And there's a somber nature to this month as we approach Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, next week. But this week we read the book of Deuteronomy. We begin Sefer Devarim, the fifth and the final of the 5 books of Moses. And this book begins with very, very simple and straightforward words. It begins with the words, Ele HaDvarim. These are the words, Asher Diber Moshe El Kol Yisrael, that Moshe said to the entire nation of Israel. It's a very simple phrase that the book begins with. These are the words that Moses said. And the continuation of the book of Devarim is a series of speeches that Moses gives, and speeches recounting their history, speeches looking forward to what's going to happen next when they go to the land of Israel, what comes next. And here are in the pure simplicity, we find something very deep and meaningful. Ele HaDvarim. These are the words that Moses said to Israel. These are the words. And these words become so much more impactful when we remember where the story began. Remember where Moses came from. Going back to the book of Exodus, in the 4th chapter of the book of Exodus, when God chooses the leader, it's Moshe. And God asks Moshe, or commands Moshe to be the leader, and Moses responds, Vayomer Moshe el Hashem bi Adonai. Moses said to God, please, O Lord, Lo ish devarim anochi. I am not a man of words. Lo ish devarim. And that word that the Torah uses for words, for devarim, repeats itself here. Towards the end of the Torah, Ele HaDvarim, these are the words. So how does a person go in the course of a lifetime, in the case of Moshe, in the course of his career as leader, from being, I am not a person of words, to having an entire book of the Bible named Devarim, the words that he spoke to the children of Israel? How does a person go from a place of self-doubt, of doubting oneself, of doubting one's abilities, I am not a person of words, to being a master of words, and the ability to deliver those words which ultimately give the people the strength and the motivation and the inspiration to go into Israel? And I would argue that, of course, it doesn't happen in one moment, but it's learned, and it is essential. It's an essential aspect of human growth to go from doubting ourselves to believing ourselves, because so much of human capability and capacity is found within the belief that yes, I can do it. Yes, I will be the one to make it happen. I was reminded, there was a story I tell about a Hasidic Rebbe who was walking with his students, and it began to rain. And the Rebbe stopped and looked up at the rain clouds and turned to the disciples and said, "So my students, how do you know that the sky wants to rain? How do you know that the sky wants to rain?" And the students were perplexed. And then the Rebbe answered his own question. He said, "You know the sky wants it to rain because it's raining." And he continued, he said, this is what human nature, this is what the human condition is. That if you want to know if someone wants to do something, well, just look at them. If they're doing it, then they want to do it. We do what we want to be doing, and if we aren't doing it, then we don't really want to. So much of what we achieve in life is dependent on our own attitude and our own initiative. It's easy to sit back and to contemplate and to say what the right path is, what not the right, but at a certain point, action is what determines our will. Action is what determines our ability to achieve something positive in this life. And I want to close just with a reflection on the 9th of Av, as we're approaching that date this week, the day that commemorates the destructions of the temple, the day that commemorates the destruction of the first and the second temple. It's a day of sadness. It's also a day of hope. It's a day in which there's a future promise for rebuilding, and so we're consoled in that sense. But the day as well, the Mishnah teaches that there was another event, a biblical event that took place on the 9th of Av, and that was the sin of the spies. And as the teaching goes, that the sin of the spies happened, that the people were punished not to go into the land of Israel on this day, on the 9th of Av, and because the spies came back and were whining and crying, and so the Almighty said, well, they're going to whine on this day about going into the land of Israel, about the next step of their journey. They're going to be pessimists. They're going to cry about it. Therefore, this is going to be a day of crying for all generations. And the sin of the spies is a sin of attitude. It's the spies. 12 people went into the land of Israel. 2 came back with a positive report. That's Yehoshua and Kalev. And 10 came back with a negative report. And the negative report was more than simply looking at what was and establishing a decision. It was an approach. It was an attitude. It was a can't-do attitude. And so this day of Tisha B'Av reminds us of the ramifications, the repercussions of pessimism, of approaching life and saying, no, it's too much for me. No, that goal which I have in mind, it's too difficult for me to do it. We are defined in life by what we do, by how we approach life, by the attitude and the positive attitude that we bring into the challenges that stand before us. Speaking of Tisha B'Av, the destruction, how precious these buildings are, how precious the Beit HaMikdash, the temple in Jerusalem, is to our people in terms of our history, and how precious our institutions, which are meant to reflect the Beit HaMikdash, in particular our synagogues, how precious they are to us, and how all the more we realize this preciousness, even as we've been away for so long, for too long. And we know that we have a great deal of building ahead of us. We know that as society slowly opens, and it has, and we're already having outdoor evening services, and we're looking ahead to other progressions in reopening. And as we plan ahead, as we know we have a good deal of rebuilding to do, we have to do it with a can-do attitude. We know we'll be able to restore what was lost in terms of programs, in terms of gatherings, in terms of community. We're going to have the patience. We're going to do it in the right way. We're going to do it in the safest possible way. But we also know that to achieve anything, in particular after these months and months of pain, of suffering, of difficulty, we have to approach whatever it is we do in community, in life, with a positive attitude. I can do it, I will do it, and we will ultimately be judged by the actions we do. Just as the clouds are judged by the ability to rain, we determine their will. We're going to demonstrate through our actions what we want to do and what we want to achieve in rebuilding and restoring the greatness of our community. Hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful Shabbat, and it's now my honor to turn it over to Yosi Even-Hen. Shabbat Shalom.
Many people associate Yom Kippur with sadness and with sorrowfulness. However, this is misplaced, as Yom Kippur is not a sad day. The saddest day in the Jewish calendar is Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. The 9th day of Av, God willing, will be observed next Thursday. Tisha B'Av, we observe primarily the destruction of both temples and the destruction of Jerusalem. And that is why I decided to stand behind this stained glass depiction of fire. Other occurrences, such as the 12 spies returning and speaking ill of Israel on their scouting report, occurred on Tisha B'Av. Bar Kochva's revolt was also crushed on this day, resulting in some 580,000 Jewish deaths, 500,000 of which were civilians. The First Crusade started on this day, as well as the expulsion from England, France, and Spain. And many other occurrences that have been detrimental to and have brought great Jewish suffering occurred on this day throughout history. Part of the ritual is not only fasting for 25 hours, but we also chant the book of Eicha, as well as numerous lamentations kinot. One of these most famous of these kinot is called Eli Tzion Ve'areha, and the initial words of an acrostic elegy for the fast day of the 9th of Av. This kinah, this eulogy, this lamentation was written in the Middle Ages, and its authorship remains unknown. It consists of 12 stanzas, and each closing with the refrain, "Wail Zion and its cities, as a woman in labor pains, and like a maiden that dons sackcloth to mourn for her husband of her youth." The Kinah enumerates in detail the cruelty suffered by Judea and its inhabitants during the destruction of the Second Temple. Elitzion is usually sung by the congregation standing, and the refrain is sung slowly, and in some traditions even twice. It has also become, in many Ashkenazi communities, a symbol of the yearly commemoration of the destruction of the temple. And as well, this tune has also been adopted for other kinot. And although Lecha Dodi, which we sing Friday night, is usually sung to an upbeat and a cheerful melody, in order to remind the congregation that Tisha B'Av is approaching, it has become a widespread custom on the Shabbat preceding Tisha B'Av to chant specifically Lecha Dodi to this tune. And part of that reason is because Lecha Dodi actually deals with the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד. השם אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה, קומי צאי מתוך ההפכה, רב לך שבט בעמק הבכה, והוא יחמול עלייך חמלה. lecha דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. lecha דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התנערי מעפר קומי, לבשי בגדי תפארתך עמי, על יד בן ישי בית הלחמי, קורבה אל נפשי גאלה. lecha דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. lecha דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לא תבושי ולא תקלמי, מה תשתוכחי ומה תהמי, בך יחסו עניי ימי, ונבנתה עיר על תלה. lecha דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. lecha דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. והיו למשיסה שוסייך, ורחקו כל מבלייך, יסיס עלייך אלוהייך, כמסוס חתן על כלה. lecha דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. lecha דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהולה, תוך אמוני ים סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Shabbat Shalom.